Hey, Brittany, we're back at the E word.
We are. Happy New Year. How are
Happy
you?
New Year. I'm good. I'm good. I got over the flu
Yes,
last
excellent.
last week. So I didn't think I was gonna get it, but I got it. But I'm feeling much
Listen,
better.
I love that. That is the gift that keeps on giving. I think I had it the week before. So I like to say that's how we started off the year. It's all uphill from here. I mean, it's all good things from here.
All good things. I decided that my year wasn't going to start until February 1st because of all
Oh, I
the
love it.
trauma that happened. Okay.
Yeah,
So far in January. So thank you for more.
exactly.
But just because my year didn't start, right, is not starting, doesn't mean that other people's years aren't starting and that the drama continues.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And, I wish we all could be as relaxed as Mina is, but it's okay.
I know. But Mina, we were talking right before the show, everyone, that Mina wasn't around and then she came over to say, hey, get started.
Exactly.
She's producing the show now. So
Yes, she is our executive producer. So,
Mina
uh,
Hale is in the building.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
a hard name. Hold on. Mina Hale. She should be an actress.
She should. Where's the star? I love it.
Love it. I love it. But, okay. When was it, last week or the week before, when all this news came out around McDonald's? We weren't loving it,
Right.
right? Because all the news came out that McDonald's has eradicated their DEI practices. I was like, oh my goodness, right?
I
But
know.
then sometimes you have to look a little bit further, right? And
It's true.
we discovered that those are the headlines, but it's not that they eradicated their DEI, principles. They're
Okay.
actually evolving them.
Mm. All right. So, I mean, this company feeds 68 million people a day. So, what does a DEI evolution look like?
Well, they have a purpose and impact report, and of course, you can go to their page, right?
Okay.
And on the very first page of their purpose and impact report, it says our purpose is to feed and foster communities, right?
Mm.
As a leading global food service retailer, we believe it's our responsibility to make a positive impact on the world. And this makes sense, right? So, like, even when the news came out, my immediate thought was, oh my God, that's horrible, but how? Right? Because
Right.
it is a brand that is integrated globally, right? That is very deeply entrenched in certain communities and touches so many different aspects of life because it is a
Right.
food supplier. So, how do you pull back? What does that look like in terms of pulling back your DEI practices, right? And this is, I think, one of the we've talked about this a lot, that in the political agenda, DEI is one thing. It is about race, right?
Yes.
And that's so far from the truth. It is a multifaceted discipline across your organization that is focused on the community or even the greater society, depending on how your brand interacts with it, right? And so that's why I think it's really important to like dig into what they were doing and what they are planning to do now, right? And when
Right.
you have an organization that not only focuses on jobs, but also planet and food quality and community, right? You have so many different aspects of where not just DEI, because DEI is I think, is part of like a bigger discipline, right?
Right.
But where their purpose and their impact from their purpose and impact really falls into in the greater scheme of things.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. So if I just to level set everybody, right? They have 4 areas.
Okay.
They focus on the planet, so that's climate action, packaging and
Okay.
toy waste. Packaging, toys, and waste, nature, forests, and water. So that's under the planet. Under food quality and sourcing, their categories are food safety, nutrition and marketing practices, which I think is actually pretty interesting, responsible
Mhm.
sourcing, animal health and welfare, and responsible antibiotic use. Under jobs, inclusion and empowerment fall human
Okay.
rights, DEI, and talent and benefits. And we're going to see DEI evolve more towards inclusive
Okay.
efforts. And then community connection, which is community impact and philanthropy. And of course, the famed Ronald McDonald House charities.
Okay.
So a lot of different areas that they touch.
All right. So this inclusion and empowerment being morphed, melded into inclusion.
Yes. Yes. So
Hmm.
I think there's a lot to unpack in it, but I think the way that we could kind of sum it up is that they actually have been doing well on all of these fronts.
Right.
Right? And so if you are moving from, say, aspiration to, or if you have moved from aspiration and you've gotten the work done, right, to a certain degree that your company is proud of, you've met your goals, maybe you're even doing better than other benchmark organizations around you. What
Mhm.
is your next step? Do
Right.
you stop, right? Or are you looking for a way to be more impactful
Right.
in what you're already doing?
Yeah.
And if you dive deeper into their report and their data, you see they're doing actually very well in these areas and they're focused on it. Of course, this is self-reported. So let's just
Right. But I also want to note at least what I saw in, kind of the coverage over the years.
Mhm.
They're recognized as one of the best places to work for LGBTQ plus equality for 7 years.
Yeah.
Right? So for almost a decade, this has been a space that's been recognized for, what we would now call inclusive practices. Right? So that's very interesting.
Well, the Human
That
Rights
like,
Equality Index, they got 100 for many years in a row, a perfect score.
mm-hmm,
So where do you go from there? So, just
right.
to underline that point you're making. Sorry to interrupt.
No, 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 no. I think that's a perfect kind of segue into what that evolution is, because it seems like the Human Rights Campaign Foundation's Corporate Equality Index is almost a target, right, for conservative groups who want to advance a political agenda to either adjust or eradicate DEI programming.
Right.
And so now, given that, I mean, it seems like McDonald's is saying they are going to take a step back and that they're no longer going to self report to external groups and really just kind of focus on what they're doing internally.
Mhm.
Uh, One, I'm curious to know what you think about that. And then two, I'm also curious to know what happens to these indexes. What do we do with that if other companies follow suit and stop self-reporting? Is there value in even having these still?
I believe in the reporting because people need to aspire to something. So
Mhm.
I understand to some degree why McDonald's is like, oh, we keep getting 100. Like, what's the value? I'm sure it's not easy to pull these reports together, the resources, all of that stuff, right? And so if you know, every organization has limited resources in some one area or the other, right? No matter how big they are. And so they may be redirecting those resources into something that they feel is going to be more impactful for their business. So I understand the thinking if that's the thinking. At the same time, when you don't have organizations that are like you can't see that organizations are capable of reaching the higher thresholds, then the companies that are aspiring to that, will have this issue. Like, you have to see it to believe it, right? Essentially.
Right.
So I still believe in the reporting. I think the Human Rights Index has some work to do around, unfortunately, right, because of the attacks on them, on how they can evolve their process. I don't know if it needs to be easier. I don't know. I don't know the details around that. But to encourage companies to not give up on, reporting and benchmarking. Those benchmarks are incredibly important. Like when we consult for clients, right? People want to know how they're doing against other organizations. So
Right.
I really do think it's the responsibility of the organizations to continue reporting into them. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I always think that there needs to be some sort of accountability. I'm also very aware of the conversations that tend to lead a lot of these organizations, which are, one, we don't want to attract any sort of undue attention from these groups that are litigious, that seem to have support at the executive level. And how do we continue to, one, maintain our business success without attracting any sort of undue attention? So it seems like a lot of companies are going to want to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And I see a space where, in so doing, they may not report externally. But I guess I'm trying to figure out what that external reporting looks like. Is it you just continue to report to these, to the HRC, until someone tells you to stop, right? Until you receive some sort of injunction or whatever? Or do we evolve the way that people report?
I think it's an evolution. It might also be that these organizations join with, organizations like the Human Rights Index, right? Like, to, especially the ones that are doing well, to be like, all right, well, where do we go from here? So how do we evolve those practices? They know best because they're doing the hard work, instead of just saying, no, we don't need to do this anymore. Maybe they don't need to do this anymore. They might not need to do this version of it anymore. So what is version 2.0, 3.0 look like? So I would invite them to, think about that and participate in the larger discussion. One of the things that I think should be aspirational for all brands, but particularly those like McDonald's, is to become a regenerative brand, which is actually giving more than what it's taking out.
Okay.
And what does that look like? Maybe that's where McDonald's and other companies like them should be tracking towards. It might be a very elite, exclusive group, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Be those forward-thinking organizations that are here for society. Their purpose, what did I say their purpose was? It was like to foster, is to feed and foster family.
Feed and foster, yep.
And, feed can be a very specific term, but it could also mean something a lot broader.
Yes.
And so, what does that mean in a more enlightened society, right? It is one of the most recognized global brands, right? Everywhere, worldwide, everybody knows McDonald's.
Yes.
Some form or fashion. We know how every single person almost probably knows how it tastes or how it's supposed to taste. Depends on what
yes. I had a very delicious Le Big Mac in Paris, I have to say.
Did it taste the same?
It tasted a little bit better, in my opinion, but the flavor combinations were the same. And I think that's what you go to them for, right? Is that consistency. And to the point of them really kind of renaming their DEI team to their global inclusion team, they're inclusive of the flavors that are best represented in those markets.
Yeah.
Right. So when you go to when you go to McDonald's, in Southeast Asia, you're going to have different flavors represented, right? You may have ube and, other, which is a purple sweet potato for people who
Mm-hmm.
are unfamiliar. And that's not something that's present in Paris, but we're also going to have other types of flavors that, a Parisian market or a French market is going to respond to. And I think
Right.
that in and of itself is the articulated value of inclusion. And I can understand why they're moving toward inclusion, given that diversity, maybe unfairly, has become politicized and maligned.
And maybe they have achieved the diversity, right? They don't need to call that part out anymore, right?
Right.
They are maybe have already embedded many of the equity components, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it no longer needs to be highlighted as a focus. I mean, one of the main things is that a lot of this was aspirational and they have
Right.
done it, right? And
Right.
now it's just around just all the time being inclusive, all the time, because they have diversity, they've shortened up their practices, and now it's just about iterating that inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that inclusion is absent of diversity and equity? No, because right, what's the statement? You can have diversity without inclusion, but you can't have inclusion without diversity, right? For example.
Right.
So it's embedded in that systemic process that they've already put into place, and they'll have to keep, I think honestly they'll have to keep monitoring, right? Like, because the pendulum can switch for whatever
Sure.
reason at any time.
Right.
But it seems as if this is just about language rather than action
Correct.
here,
Correct. Right.
without working there, obviously. And it seems as if because they changed their language and the rhetoric that's going around, it's just created an inflammatory environment around it. But if we think critically about it, there is no way that a company like McDonald's could eradicate it. It is
Correct.
their soul, essentially. You know what I mean?
And they want to maintain their presence in really every market.
Yeah.
Right. And if
Yeah.
they wanted, so being myopic or, say, hey, this doesn't matter, only creates an opportunity for a competitor to fill that gap.
Yeah.
So for a small business, there's a space where you could get up and look around the building and say, we don't have a lot of women in IT.
Mm-hmm.
Or, whatever the case is, we don't have a lot of women in marketing. And maybe you make certain inferences that lead to business decisions that way. That is impossible for an organization like McDonald's. However, it is important that they understand who's buying these franchises, you know, what do the demographics look like for particular areas, not only of the country, not only of the United States, but of the world? And how do we amplify our own business success based on what we know? We have to know that.
Yeah. One thing that's there's so much in this report, right? But they have five
Mm-hmm.
core values.
Okay.
One, serve. We put our customers and people first.
Okay.
Number two, inclusion. We open our doors to everyone.
Mm.
3 is integrity. We do the right thing. 4, community. We are good neighbors. And 5 is family. We get better together. I'm not mad at those.
No, I can't say that I am.
I'm not mad at those. And their growth pillars, one of their first growth pillars
Mm-hmm.
is marketing.
Oh, tell me more.
Staying connected to what our customers love about us and bringing that emotion into our creative. The second pillar is core. Our core menu remains our competitive advantage and a strength that we are capitalizing on to grow share. And their third and final pillar is digital delivery, drive-through, and development. They're 4Ds. We will continue to
Okay.
expand our loyalty program to power personalized experiences while getting closer to our customers by accelerating the development of new locations. So, just what I like about the growth is it's really very focused on the customer set, right?
Right.
I just said they're going to listen and represent because I guess their
Correct.
primary vehicle is through that creative. Creative is huge, right? But that's how we get to know McDonald's in many different ways. And they're going to keep that consistency, what we love about it. And they're going to find new ways to share, more about what we love.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like all these other components. Like one of the things that was highlighted in some of the more negative articles was that they were pulling back on their supplier diversity uh, outreach and goals, right? But it's been a very core component of how they operate. And so it seems to be more not like we're going to pull back on goals. We've met our goals. How do
Right.
we
I believe
deepen that
3 years
engagement?
ahead of time, right?
Exactly. How do we deepen and evolve that engagement?
Right.
What does that look like? You and I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But it's if this is all true, right? It's where we want
Mm-hmm.
companies to be because they could have
Mm-hmm.
very easily said, check, check, we're
Right.
done.
Exactly.
And they're
Exactly.
like, yeah, we're good, but we could be better.
Correct.
We
Correct.
could be better.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Now again, the news cycle is going to be full of reactionary headlines. And to your point, we delve deeper because that's what we do. And if you are listening or watching, that's what you come to us for, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the deep dive. But everyone is not going to do that.
No.
Additionally, as we continue to evaluate these steps, we're entering a new space. No one can say for certain. I mean, I don't have my crystal ball with me. Got lost in the mail. I don't know if you happen to have yours.
No. Mine broke.
But like given that we're flying a little bit blind, how much grace do we owe these companies to iterate, to figure it out, knowing that all of their moves are going to be assessed and or in a headline?
Part of me feels like we have no choice. Like we you and I know this how the speed of business goes. You and I know
Right.
how hard this stuff is
Right.
in terms of not even doing it, but more so in communicating what you're doing and measuring what you're doing.
Right.
I think there's no argument that the metrics are still a little amorphous to many organizations, or they're just limited to, you know, mostly things around the talent pipeline when there's so many other aspects to dive into. And then
Mm.
people are paralyzed by fear because of, the rhetoric around DEI. So I think we have to give some grace in that respect, but we
Mm-hmm.
can't allow people to take their foot off the gas
Right.
around this. And what does that look like in terms of allowing, like, as a general consumer, we have these our social media platforms, like, so we say things out loud. Um, we hopefully do our research. We become more informed and educated consumers. And then ultimately, we just put our dollars where our mouth is. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what I find a little tricky about that, to be honest, is that this is all about collective power. And, I can decide I'm not going to shop somewhere anymore and spend my dollars there. But how does that translate into a collective action or even a collective report that because of this thing that company X did, their shares have gone down, their revenues have gone down because Karen and 20 million of her closest friends decided that they were no longer going to spend their dollars there. There's a disconnect in making that connection. And
Right.
so it kind of sometimes feels, if I'm being honest, like, it falls on deaf ears, right? Because we don't know how to galvanize effectively around this stuff. And a friend of mine were talking about this morning. It was like, for the Black community in particular, right? Like,
Okay.
some of our, like, the heroes or the voices are gone, or they're not as loud as they were, say, in the 1960s, because
Right.
we can just go on social media and say something, but there's no organizing. But the problem is there's
Correct.
no organizing around it.
Right.
Whereas back then there was organizing around all of this.
Right.
And so we've lost this human connection to the organization of power and influence. And we have to figure out a way to get that back. Otherwise, we're just reading headlines and reacting to them, but not doing anything about them.
Correct.
It's kind of a
I think
sad
that's kind of the down part of the advancement of technology, right? We scroll, we have the reaction, and then we scroll once more, and we're placated because we can see something that's more pleasing. And so then we forget to ask the question, what do we do, or what can be done? If I don't like this, what can I do about it?
Yeah, it's like when, for example, when George Floyd was murdered, and I was president of the New York chapter of the American Marketing Association, right? At the time, AMA, CEO and leadership were not really interested in participating in the conversation. And a few chapters, few presidents, me and like 6 others, were very intent on doing something, and we didn't know what that was at first. Now we're all over the country, so Zoom and stuff was,
Right.
right.
Still gaining its legs. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But we organized around that using technology, right, to bring us together. And we organized around it on a regular basis. So there was some consistency around it. We met, I think it was every week, right? And then we figured out what we were going to do. We got it done. And we met like every day, like not every day, like quite often for a year, right? And to execute our plan. And there was an attachment to not only the issue, but to the people that we were working together, right? And we became friends. And that was very unique because of the situation. But if you also think about if you are organizing and you have to go to a meeting, right? You have to physically put yourself in these spaces, and the energy that comes off of that fuels your action, fuels your emotion. Then you actually get more done through that. But like you said, with social media, if you're not connected, like truly connected personally, not only to the issue, but the people that are fighting with you, like you need that group mentality sometimes to keep you going. Then it's so easy to just scroll and go see, puppies. Okay? I love the puppies. There's so many times I'm like, I don't want to see that. Scroll, puppies.
Exactly.
So we have to take responsibility. I mean, we are about to shift into a new era right now with the changing of the administration, who has some pretty broad sweeping policies that are pretty, antithetical to my own personal beliefs, and I think many others. And there can be a feeling of hopelessness around it. I have to admit, I don't know exactly what to do or what, all the time, but I think the biggest things that we can do, that we have no choice to do, is use our power of voice, at the very least.
Yeah. And I think it's always a valuable question before we ask where are we going and what do we do, is how do we get here? What is very clear is there's a significant group of people who felt unheard. And this administration is a result of that. Whether or not it was truly true that they were unheard, the point is, to your point, they use their voice, right, to exercise their power.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are facing the unknown, and I understand that there's a lot of emotional reactivity to it. But as you said, the point is to continue to use our voice, continue to be curious and ask questions, and continue to have these conversations.
If you were advising a company right now that is not McDonald's, right? Has been doing some good work.
Okay.
But is fearful of the admin that's coming in or being, laser pointed at for some reason. What would be, you're talking to management, the CEO, right, or C-suite team, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
My piece of advice would be to continue to ask the question of how this furthers our business success. Mm-hmm. Do any of these initiatives further our business success? If so, how? And how do we know? That's always a question I want to know. How do we know? If this is something that was performative, perhaps PR, if it was something where, again, you're trying to keep up with your competitors within your particular industry. Oh, they're doing this, so now we need to do this. My question is, well, why? How does this further? What is the legitimate business purpose of this? And how do we know it's successful?
I think that's fair.
I think authenticity is going to be critical as we move forward, because however people feel about the administration, at the end of the day, people are going to want to be able to trust that what they're being presented with is the truth, mm-hmm, in some way, shape, or form. We all develop relationships with brands. We all have these relationships that we pour into. And so I'm assuming that the organization I'm working with is somehow customer facing or has some sort of customer facing arm. Ultimately, they are going to have to present a perspective to the public that you have to update your About Us page. Like it's going to have to happen. But you need the clarity and you need to be able to mount a very strong defense before you even I'm not even talking about the courtroom. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about for the casual person coming through to say, well, what is this about this inclusion stuff you all have going on.
Yeah.
You need to be able to answer very clearly how this furthers your mission, your business goal. Ostensibly, you're in business because you want to solve a problem and be very successful at doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to continue year after year to continue to be more and more and more profitable. This has to feed directly into it. And so we spoke about accountability a little bit earlier. You know me, I'm a political optimist. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to seek the opportunity in all of the adversity, and I'm going to see how does this deepen the trust between this particular company and their target audience.
I mean, that's absolutely right. I have my militant look on today, so I would also add to that is do all those things and then go control your freaking company, right?
Correct.
You're a CEO, you run things, okay? Don't let any outside force tell you how to run your business, okay? If it works for
Correct.
you, if you think that these principles, however they show up in your organization, just like you said, are important and are meaningful, go do the damn thing and run your business and don't let nobody else push you around. That's my little tough love.
That's it, and that's all, folks.
Take care of your damn business.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I'm glad we got to talk about this today. That it's some positive news about a company leaning into its values and not pulling back and not running scared. And
Correct.
so kudos to McDonald's for their hard work all these years and continue to make us proud and show us how it's done, you know, and report on it so we know.
And report on it. Exactly.
All right,
Because
Brittany. Mina, are we done? Are we good? Was that a good episode,
we
Mina?
got the paw. Yep. So it's time to wrap it up.
All right, then. Until the next time on the E Word. Bye, Brittany.